Hey guys, I'm back. So we're gonna put this thing back together, and in the interest of keeping the video under an hour, I'm just going to walk you through putting the boot back on and the knuckle back on. Everything else from there out I've already covered in the teardown video, as far as giving you details and all and that you might need to know, and it's very straightforward. So we're gonna keep this a little shorter, hopefully, because I think the teardown was already an hour and something probably. So on this, I've figured out why the band came off to begin with. I want to show you the inner band. The boot actually was not torn on this side. The other side, I think it is. I need to go look, but the inner band had come off, and the reason for that, if you look at the ears here, see how they're misshapen? Like they're supposed to be round, and it's kind of bent. See that? Now, if you look here on the knuckle, right there, see all those scratch marks in the primer inside? They had this clocked wrong. They had this kind of clocked back like that, and when they turn, it just the knuckle catches this because there's not enough clearance, and it peeled it off. Probably the first time they turned it, or a couple times, because there's several different scratch marks there. So I'm sure it worked on it a little bit and then it knocked it off. Yeah, so clocking the inner band, very important. Also, there are some other things to mention as far as the bands are concerned. These are the new ones from Big Mike's. And this goes for any of them, not just Big Mike's, but if you look at the band, this is the outer. You can see that the screw is offset to one side. That is significant. This is the inner. It's the same way. If you put this on wrong, it will either tear the boot or make the band come off. And I'll show you that. Now, before we get into putting it all back together, I mentioned the inner seal earlier. I want to show you something about that before I get this rolling. If you decide that you need to, or you want to change your inner seal while you're in there, I would strongly suggest you do if you've just gotten your truck or if you've never changed it, because they leak and then it screws up everything. This is your seal and retainer, okay? Now, it looks like the seal is made in there and that you can only get it out from inside, but that's not the case. This is the retainer, and it's just stepped, and you knock it in there with a hammer. Now, you can get this out sometimes with a slide hammer. Sometimes they're really hard to get out with a slide hammer. What I usually do is I'll take both sides apart, and I'll go all the way through the differential with a 1-inch solid round piece of aluminum solid stock, and I'll knock it out from the inside, and it's real easy that way. Now, this, you can either get just the seal and change the seal out of the retainer, or you can get this whole piece right here, brand new from Big Mike's. So just FYI. Now that we've covered that, because it's in there and it's pertinent to the conversation, the boot. Now, the boots from Big Mike's are silicone. These are not the ones I mentioned in the other video, which are paper thin and shitty. These are good, reasonably thick boots, and you're not going to tear it just messing with it. So, okay, putting the boots on. There are, if you look at it, there are furrows in the baffles, or bellows, that's the better word. The furrows go straight up and straight down. These furrows are supposed to be centered over the kingpins. So what you do is you'll take your inner band, and you want to put your inner band on just like this, with the offset towards the inside of the truck, okay? You don't want it out towards the wheel. You want it leaning in towards the truck. Just going to take your band and lay it on there. Now, before you put anything on, including that band, you need to make sure that this groove on the back of the inner knuckle here is completely clean and dry of any debris or grease or anything. Same with the whole outside surface of the knuckle. It has to be completely spotless, nothing on it. And that is because if you slide this over and you get any kind of oil residue on this lip right here, which sits down in this groove here, it will come off. And it will come off really easily when you turn or on your first test drive, and you'll have to do all of this over again because you cannot put this on with any grease on here. It has to be clean and dry. So you'll have to clean all of your brand new grease out and off of this thing just because the boot slipped off. So take the extra time and make sure everything is totally dry, spotless. Then you take your boot and we'll put it on like this with your furrows and your bellows straight up and straight down. And this is always the scary part, is when you have to just like stretch it over the kingpins. So you hear it go and actually pop solidly down into the groove there. Now, I'll show you here how that furrow is pretty much centered over the kingpin. I'll probably rotate it a little bit towards the front, but it's pretty close. That's how you want it. Now, I've seen these come out of the military with these furrows like offset almost to the front and all the way to the front, just all kinds of stupid ways. It's like people don't pay attention, you know. And I guess in the Army, if you're doing this and you're not really getting paid that much, you don't give a shit. And you know, the same thing with civilian contractors and overhaul facilities. Friday or whatever, or the union's not doing what you think they should. All right, so we've got the boot on, and it is thoroughly seated in the groove all the way around. You want to make sure, check that. Now you've got your band. And these bands from Big Mike's are, remember what I was complaining about earlier? They have a Phillips, which is awesome. So, they are a Phillips and a 5/16. So, and I should have backed this off before the video, started the video, but I didn't think about it. Because I, literally between making the teardown video and this one, I haven't stopped. I'm just working, so I didn't think about it. Open it up all the way. Sometimes you got to take it off. I'm probably going to have to take this one off. Yeah. You don't want to bend it, so in this case, you want your offsets towards the inside of the truck, and you want these ears straight up and even with your top kingpin, okay? So, I'm going to put this on now. Very careful attention going all the way around, that you are not anywhere you're not supposed to be with it. Put the screw in from the front or from the back, facing either way, it does not matter. As long as your ears are leaning in towards the kingpin and lined up with it. Now, some of you are going to wonder why it needs to be lined up with the kingpin, and I will explain that in a minute. This is the easy part. The outer band is the one that's a huge pain in the ass. So, and now let's start to get finger tight. We're going to take our screwdriver. Start tightening it down. If I had to change anything about these bands, it would be to make the loops tighter, closed, smaller holes, so to speak. But they are pretty good regardless. So as it gets tight, you want to make sure it doesn't get offset. This one kind of is starting to offset towards the front, so you want to pull it while you still can. But be careful that you don't do that when it's too tight. If you need to loosen it off a little, loosen it off a little, because you can tear the boot just moving it like that with it kind of snug. What you want to do is tighten this pretty much all the way up. See, it popped off, but popped off on the back here. Not sure why, but it sure did. I hope you can see what I'm doing and I'm not just like, yeah, okay. Kinda, huh? Maybe kinda over here. So pull the boot back forward. Now you can hold the backup nut with your finger for a certain amount of time. And making sure the band stays where it's supposed to be while you do this is another story. I'm holding the band out where it needs to be, letting the wrench just kind of rest there. It's holding its own back up. And I'm using my fingers on my right hand to hold the band into the groove where it slipped off last time. Now, if you can do that and it doesn't come off, you're pretty well good, but tighten it up a little more, huh? See what happens. Okay, that is completely tightened. Once again, make sure that it's not just going to easily pop off. So, all right. Now, where's my things? Hang on a second, I lost something. I'm going to grab it over there. All right, so that leaves you with that. And I don't have to tell you that that could be a major problem, is when you turn the truck, what does it do? The tail of that screw pushes under the boot. That would, in a very short time, make a hole. So, there's two things you can do with that. You can take a pair of pliers or a hammer and you can bend it down, or you can cut it off. Now, I'm not sure if this one's going to cooperate, but usually I cut them off. because once you put it on, there's no reason to take it off again until you're replacing it. So, yep, these are awesome cutters. These Knipex, like mini bolt cutters, really easy to cut things like that with. So now there's no reason that should make a hole, because the knuckle comes out to here, so it's just gonna clear it. Yeah. Put these away for a minute. Alright, now the reason you want this straight up and behind the Kingpin is the same reason the outer knuckle has to come up to come off, because you have that notch in here to clear this, so it doesn't knock it off like it did obviously before. And in fact, it looks like it's a bit too far back. Let's see. That's a little better. So the notch, the takedown notch in the outer knuckle will go around that, not knock it off. That takedown notch is that notch right there. That's the only place on the entire 360 degrees of rotation there where you can put that fastener, where the steering knuckle will not knock it off when you turn. If you put it anywhere else, I can promise you that eventually your outer steering knuckle will pull that inner band off and you'll be doing this job over again. So, glad we got that out of the way. Alright, so now what we get to do is we get to put the inner or the outer knuckle back on. Now the outer knuckle, the same rule as the inner with the groove. The groove here has to be absolutely clean, or the boot will not stay on it. It will come off. Let me do some crap out of my way again. Now getting this knuckle back on is just as much or more of a pain in the ass than it was getting it off. And it's just because the clearance is so tight in that takedown cut, and you've got the weight of the tie rod hanging on the knuckle, and yeah, so let me struggle with this a little for a minute. Get mad probably. There's some crease right there. I mean, that's no harm, but you also want to make sure before you put the boot and all on there on the tube to begin with, make sure your hands are clean and dry. I mean perfectly clean and dry. And so just a little bit of residue off your hands on the inner surface of the lip of that boot, or the outer surface, or wherever it needs to contact the clamp, like right in there. If you get some oil residue right there, it's going to come off. It's insane how sensitive it is, but believe me, it is. So I have done this too many times, I know. Alright, so go on with the bottom first. My dick. Fuck. All right, I need assistance. Nothing wrong with using shop equipment to assist you in the shop. And that is what it's for, right? So I'm going to enlist the help of my Napa 3.5 ton floor jack. You got to get the bottom on first, and it's not one to cooperate. So where that air assist cylinder, ouch, metal shard in my hand. That air assist cylinder helped by holding the knuckle up off the ground. It's hindering me now by trying to pull it down and out of line. I hate this. This is always a fight. Always. I mean, you can put the top on and then, but then the bottom won't go on because you don't have a clearance down there. At least it gives me arms a break for a minute. Okay, see if I can turn it. Come on, you cocksucker. Steering linkage is holding me up. This is always a fight. It's like, rarely does it just go back on, but once in a while. Fuck. And yes, I know somebody will invariably go, oh, well, why don't you just take the steering linkage off? I've never taken the tie rod off. Usually doesn't fight me this long. I don't know what's going on right now in particular, but whew. Take the hat off. It's starting to get a little warm. I'm wearing the sweater too. All right. What in the hell? Damn. See what I'm talking about? It's just stupid. The clearances are so close. You got to have it just perfectly placed, and then it still fights you. I mean, I had to knock it off with a dead blow. Some of them are, I guess, have a little wider takedown groove up top, and they come apart easier and go together easier. Like mine doesn't fight me as much. Go. Turn it a little to the side and come up. And there goes it. Really? So, it's a good thing that was one of the braided steel brake hoses from pea shooter that's no longer made, because that would have torn that off. Okay. Pull back. And up. And on. Okay, neat. Ah, shit. I was going to show you how to check the Kingpin bushings while I had that off. Well, I guess I'll just tell you. Take your Kingpin bushing and holder. Set it down on the Kingpin and check and see how much slack you have. If you have a decent amount, probably time to replace the Kingpin bushing. So, no secret to that, just alright. Which one is the top? This is the top. You have grooves cut in the top of the Kingpin up here. 2 grooves. Same thing on the bottom one. Those are grease grooves. You need to make sure those are clean and there's not hardened grease or mud in them. Otherwise it blocks the grease path and then you end up with excess wear quickly. So. Put your Kingpin bushing retainers back on. All right, one. A couple of the bolts to keep it in. So the idea with this, you want to keep this knuckle centered so you don't have to fight the boot as much. You are still going to fight it. There is no avoiding that. But if the knuckle is off center, you're going to have a whole lot harder time. So no, I don't have the cap on the bottom. Just got the bushing retainer. The same thing on the top. I'm just going to put the nut on with the cone, kind of temporary. But you want to get your bushing to go without too much of a fight. course, it's wanting to be a pain. Ah, you turd. There we go. Okay. Let's put one of our cones on, just as a spacer. Oh, you know what? I need that damn, screw it. It's close enough. See, I pulled the knuckle up. That's all you need. You can, if you want to at this point, go ahead and put your bottom knuckle back on, or your bottom Kingpin cover plate thing, dealy bob. And now that my hands are thoroughly greasy again, a little bit of applied carcinogenic solvent here to get them clean again. So that we can put our boot on. Now, move back to here. I got a little bit of grease on the outside. That is, I don't know where it came from, but on the outside is not a big deal. On the inside is a major problem. So, what you want to do is loosen this, your band. Where did my screwdriver go? There it is. And the wrench that goes with it is right here. You know, I used to have a roll cart. Oh well. I used to have a lot of things. Sure, I'll buy another one eventually, but not right now. Now the outer boot, the clamp, you don't want to loosen it all the way. You want to loosen it in stages, just enough that it will slip on over the boot. And the boot, you got to kind of work on around in a circle like so. And then as soon as you get to the end, it'll want to pop off somewhere else. So, it takes a lot of patience. This one's actually staying for a minute. You get your clamp on, and if you can work the clamp on without the boot coming off, you're pretty good to go. And I almost got it there, but it popped out of the retainer here, or the guide groove. Damn. And it's going to want to pull the rest of it off if I try to pull that off, so I got to loosen it more. At which point the rest of the boot will fall off. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when we were tearing this down, you cannot have this straight up, because when you put the steering arm on, it'll smash this. So, I'm going to try to rotate it, and I can almost guarantee you it's going to pull the boot off. So, let's just take it off and rotate it. Right there, that's fine, that'll work. Okay, now we've got to make sure that that is in its groove. I want to rotate it a bit more. Straightforward, there we go. Okay, push it together, run the nut up by hand. check the circumference, make sure your boot and band are even. The band is in the groove on the boot. Tighten the band. All right, that's finished. And you don't even have to bend or cut this off if you don't want to, because your boot guard goes on over it, and it's got plenty of clearance. It's not going to hit anything. So, all right. Now, when you get to seeing people talk about what a hard time it is putting the outer boot clamp on and this, that, and the other, refer them to this video. And I dare somebody to say I don't know what I'm doing putting boots on these things. Because I guarantee you've never seen anybody have that easy a time doing it. And why? Because I've struggled with it so many other times. So what we're going to do is take our bolts back out of this bottom Kingpin. Put the plate on. And the plate is like trapezoidal shaped. It only goes on one way. And you really can't put the greaser in facing inside the axle, so you can't screw it up. I guess that's what I'm getting at. So it's got some more oil on it than I like, so I'm going to spray it off. Cool. So put this bottom plate back on. The wide side goes inside, I think. Yeah. Put your two back bolts in, the ones towards the back of the truck, because the two front bolts hold the boot guard on. So just like with anything else, do not tighten any of them up until you got all of them in. So take off the top one. Don't you come in here looking for something to steal, you little turd. Scooter's back. He stole one of my bearings yesterday out of a parts box. Found it in the yard this morning. What do you... I'm not giving you no love. You're in trouble. So, you remember this? A hardened bearing plate. It's got a little bit of a taper on it. Put the narrow side down towards the Kingpin. Now don't worry about grease or any of that, because you need to re-grease all of this stuff anyway immediately. Put your steering arm back on. All your tapered things, washer dealies. Okay, now you can put the boot guard back on. There's a fender there, and that was my head. Boot guard goes on with this cutout shape inside towards the differential. I have seen people put them on backwards. I don't know how, but they managed to do it. It bends it all to shit, but they do it, trust me. Now we can start the two front nuts. the boot guard. And we're going to have to start tightening them down to push the guard down enough to get the bottom on. You see we've got like a 1/4 inch of gap here. Close enough. The guard was bends anyway, it looks like. Yeah, I'm not contacting anything, so. Sweet. Now we can tighten up all 4 bottoms. On the top, remember, you've got this for the brake line holder. Where are those 2 other nuts? No, they're on the other tray. Hang on. Well, one of them is. I don't remember the other one going flying, but I guess I'm going to have to find it, so. Oh well, fuck. Sucks. Really? Huh. There's always one, man. Always. Oh well, shit. So this tab is supposed to face straight back. Be careful tightening it, because sometimes it will try to cut your finger off when it rotates. Now where is my other nut? Yeah, this is one of those things I really cannot, I absolutely cannot stand. I can put every fastener I take off in a damn magnetic tray and I will still lose a fastener. I don't know where it is. I can't see, I don't see it. I know it's not in my grease pan, because I didn't have it over there when I was taking that apart. Thought I set 2 on that drip tray and 2 on top of the bucket there. Man, I guess I'll just have to come back to that because I can't waste too much time in this video. Find it, I'll put it on there, but you guys know it'll be on there when it leaves here, and I'm not gonna let it leave like that. So, all right, we've done all that. Now we need to start packing Knuckle, which means you have to come off of this bucket because I need it. So what we're gonna do is tidy up a little bit. Put our tools up here. And we're going to set you on the floor jack. best. Actually, that's not that bad, huh? Alright, so now it's time to start packing. And this is why I only buy grease by the 5-gallon bucket. Oh, look at that. Some lithium, or some of the old grease that the bottom Kingpin bolts pushed up into the cavity there. Oh, well. It's not enough to hurt anything. Bare hand, grease, knuckle. I've found that the inner knuckle to be properly packed here. The right amount of grease in it. Takes 3.5 pounds to 4 pounds. And if you couple that with the 2 pounds that the hub takes, that makes 6 pounds of grease for each front side. It's a lot of grease. So I'm going to get a good sloppy coating in there. And then around here on the sides, same thing. Push it in. Same thing down by the Kingpin at the bottom. Push it in there. And up top, same thing. Basically, you're packing grease in there, right? But not too much, because once again, you do need some airspace in this case. That's not. If you've watched a lot of my videos, that's not the truth with hubs. You don't need a bunch of airspace in these on the hubs. You do need some, but on these you actually do need space for the grease to go, because otherwise they'll blow the boot off or tear it. So now your shaft. Put your shaft back in, taking care not to damage the seal. You can take a little bit of grease and just wipe it on your sealing surface in your thrust washer back here. It's going to get on it anyway, but you don't want it to run dry. And also some on the shafts. There's already some surface rust here just from years. If there's no lubrication, no coating on the shaft, eventually what happens is it rusts just from corrosion. And I'm seeing some pretty badly pitted axle shafts actually just from that. So push the shaft in. It's always fun getting it to actually go in the last bit of the way. There we go. Now, you already can see, hopefully, I need you to see this better. Now my hands are all greasy. You already can see when the shaft here turned, how it picked up the grease right here. The same on the other side. Now, let's see if there's enough in there to show you. Nah, not quite. And the diff doesn't want to turn. Oh well. So, I'm going to take some more grease and just pack in here in the joint. If I had the other shaft out of the other side, could turn this real easy, but I don't, so I can't. I might be able to turn the other wheel though and see if that'll spin it. Back up in here. Hopefully you saw what I was talking about there when it turned. Now we're going to fill the rest of this cavity. Oh, I'm getting a visitor. What? I'm packing a knuckle and making a video. What do you need, darling?
Well, if you're making a video, baby, I won't bug you. Is there something I can help you with?
Nope, I'm good. Appreciate it.
You sure?
Yep. All right, that is about enough. So, pretty good there. That's going to leave airspace for expansion, or well, for movement, not expansion. And everything is covered. There's no bare steel left in there. We can do this. And if you're following this video from the last, where I mentioned that there was no thrust washer here, there's not enough in play to fit a thrust washer on this. So I think what they did is they put a thicker thrust washer on the back and spaced it out. I'm sure there's specs for that in the Dash 20 or the overhaul manual for this axle. I've never looked that up, but yeah, there's not room between the spindle. I wouldn't be able to bolt the spindle back on if I put a thrust washer there, so that's why there isn't one. I mean, I got another one in the parts box, but I keep hitting that fender with my head. Okay, so that's good to go. I did not remember to clean off the back of the spindle while I had it apart. So, I gotta do that now. Now, I mentioned in the teardown video that you need to get this, I believe the word I used was spotless. You gotta get all the grease off. Well, be realistic. It doesn't have to be clinical. You know, there can be a bit of grease or residue. When you're talking about something you're completely packing with grease, you're never gonna get all of the old stuff out, right? Unless you do a full teardown, overhaul, museum or depot level overhaul. So be realistic. I'll show you this. Another reason that this has to be packed with grease is this is a bearing surface as well. You have, oh, there's my other nut. It was stuck to the spindle. Cool. In here, you have a spindle bushing in there. That keeps the axle shaft centered in the spindle. And these cuts here are actually meant to pull grease in and push it to the spindle when the axle shaft is spinning in that grease bath. So without grease in there, that doesn't get lubricated either. So, all kind of reasons why you have to have grease in here. In fact, yeah, I'm gonna put a little more. So, There is not, was not, and should not be a gasket or sealant here. You can put silicone on there if you want, but there never was. I have yet to see a truck with any kind of sealer there that wasn't put there by a civilian. And all that does is make it very difficult to get your spindle off. So you can, I would advise against it. If you are worried about it getting water in there and a water crossing or something because there's no sealant, I can assure you it's going to get water in there anyway, even if you do put silicone on it. And you should be servicing it after you do a water crossing. So if you put silicone on that, all you're doing is stepping on your own toes. There may be a gasket available for it. Like I said, I've never seen a truck with a gasket on there. I've done a bunch of these, obviously. If you can get a gasket, go for it. I mean, I would definitely advise you to do so if you're able. But I don't find it necessary or prudent. So, all right. I'm gonna wipe my hand off and then stick my hand right back in some grease. Dummy. All right. So, if you remember before, there is a groove on the spindle that has to go down. Coincidentally, there's also a groove in the spindle that needs to go up. So there's two ways you can get it wrong. Only one way to get it right. So you slide your spindle back on your axle shaft, pick your axle shaft up. And what you're looking for is your lock tab. God damn it. Your lock tab groove needs to be up 12 o'clock. If that's up at 12 o'clock, your drain groove will be down at 6. So, come on, let's go back together now. If you're new to the channel, if you haven't noticed it yet, you will eventually notice that everything fights me, with a no exception. Be careful not to hit your studs. You do want to try to get this butted up to the knuckle, because you want to give yourself all of the room you can when you're putting the brake backing plate on. All the length of stud, that is. Put the cover back on my grease bucket before I get any debris in it. Yeah, that last Kingpin, that was stuck to the spindle here somewhere. That's why I couldn't find it. I even moved the spindle. I was like, where did it go? So before I forget, now I do believe, oh look, we're right at exactly an hour. And like I said, I wanted to get to right here and keep it at about an hour. So I have completed my goal. Hope this showed you everything you need to know. My hands are thoroughly greasy and sticky again. This is going to make turning the recording off interesting. Let me break them. I know this is really bad for me, but oh well. So all we have left to do now is to put our brake backing plate back on with our reinforcement plate, and then our hub and brake drum on with our spindle nuts and our outer hubcap, drive flange, whatever you want to call it. It's really a drive flange. And we'll be done. So that is part 2 of a 2-part series of tearing down, cleaning, and installing a one-piece front axle boot on an M35, M35A1, M34, M35A2, and A3 deuce and a half type truck. Very similar to do it on a 5-ton, but there are some differences. Everything's bigger, obviously, but the principles are the same. So I do appreciate you watching. I hope you found this all very helpful. If you have not already, if you're new to the channel, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell button so you see all of our videos when we post them. Be sure to check out our sponsors, which are always in every video listed in the description below. There are links, phone numbers, and all that good stuff. And also, if you'd like to support us here at Tactical Repair, we have a link to our Patreon page down below. You get all kinds of cool perks if you get up on our Patreon, so check it out. Thanks, and we will see you later.